Okay, working on my Chevy Silverado today. I know I've been having an issue with the truck running kind of a rough idle for me, and it's been seeming like it's a little bit down on power. Reason being that I'm going to go with right now is just going to start with something easy, and that being the spark plugs. I know I have a problem with the spark plugs fouling out sooner than they should, because looking at my valve covers there, you can see I have a little bit of blow by coming. So I think I'm going to get a little bit extra oil in the cylinders there, and that's getting on the spark plugs and making those foul out sooner than they should. So yeah, I understand that's the bigger problem, but for now I think I can get by with just changing the spark plugs and kind of putting a patch on it for a little while. So I'm going to do that, going to go through the steps on how to do that. Okay, so first thing about getting your spark plugs, if you go to your local parts store, they're going to give you a set of plugs. They're going to recommend a set. Get whatever they recommend, usually it's right, but always make sure to double check what the spark plug gap is. Checking your owner's manual, or in my case, I got lucky and it's sitting on the radiator here, and see my spark plug gap needs to be set at 60 thousandths. So for one of these engine that's perfectly stock like this is exactly what the manufacturer recommends. That's what you should do, is keep the engine as stock as possible, so that the emission systems, the ignition, the fuel systems, it knows exactly what to do as far as what to expect from the spark when you're getting that good. Okay, so the spark plugs that I bought, they're set at 40 thousandths gap, and that's not going to work for me. So what you do is you get your feeler gauge in here. I'll try to get that focused. You get your feeler gauge in there, and you set that right in between the gap, between the end of your core right there and that little feeler, that ledge, because right between these 2 points right here, that's where your spark actually happens. So what you need is your feeler gauge set already at 60 thousandths, and if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. You need to widen that gap, and if there's extra room in there, you need to close that gap down. And so the way that you do that, I got this handy dandy piece. It's a nice Craftsman part from Sears. Basically you put this on here, and you're going to bend that ledge up. Better go wider. Bend that ledge up, and it's just a little bit, because these were preset to 40 thousandths, and I'm just going to 60 thousandths. Once I get this set, that feeler gauge should just barely slip in there. It shouldn't be loose. It should be almost tight, but not quite, where it'll fit in between that gap in there, but it doesn't, it kind of catches, but it's not stuck. Okay, so I got this one done here, and you'll need to do all of them, but basically, if you look at that gap right there, this gap on this feeler gauge is 60 thousandths, and it just barely fits in there if it's at the right angle. It's not tight. That might be a little bit tight, but only maybe a thousandths tight. But it's not tight, and it still fits in there. So that's exactly what you want right there. You set all 8 of your spark plugs to that spec right there, or at least check to make sure that that's what they are. And then you can go on about installing them. Okay, so I already got one of these changed. I'm on to the second one. It's easier to see it. But I pulled the cap off, and that one you might have to just use a little bit of muscle. Try not to pull on the back side of this boot and just pull it at an angle off. Try to grab it on the boot and just kind of wiggle it and pull it off that way. It's a little bit tougher that way, but that way you know you're not going to break your wire inside that inside the protective covering. So basically, the best way to go about this is you just do these one by one. And so you start at the front, work your way to the back, go to the other side, start at the front, work your way to the back. That way you know you aren't going to mess up the wires, the correct order, the firing order, or anything like that. It's a 5/8 socket, and so what you want is a deep well socket with an extension on it, and you definitely want a thin walled deep well, just so that for me, I got this heat shielding in here, just so that there's room for the socket in between the spark plug and this actual heat shield here. Because when you put these back on, you go hand tight and then a 1/16 of a turn tighter. So if you can't hand tighten it because that socket's hitting on the side, one, you might either get the spark plug put in at an angle and strip the head out, or the spark plug, not good. or you might go too tight or not tight enough, and that's not good either. Okay, so I'm pulling out the old ones here and just looking at them. They just look incredibly dirty. I don't know how else to describe it. They got a bunch of material buildup on there. It looks like a bunch of carbon buildup, and they look like they're burning wrong, especially when you compare them to the new one that's nice and shiny. These, when they went in, these two burnt ones, they were silver, so I think it's definitely due for a change on them. Okay, so I got my new plug put in there. One thing that I say you should always do is use dielectric grease, and me, I got the nice big can of it, but basically what I do is I fill up this cap right here full of grease. You can see some in there already from the past time, but I'm going to put more in, and that, again, just to make sure that you don't get any corrosion under your spark plug cap, so that way you don't have a problem if you happen to run through a puddle to clean off the underside of your truck. You don't have to worry about water getting up in there, just maybe somewhere else. So just one less issue to worry about. Okay, so I got the last one done. Went ahead and put a new air filter on too. One thing you should always do is just give the vehicle a test start and just make sure that, and listen to it real good. Make sure you aren't hearing any misfires or anything like that, just to make sure that you didn't switch around a couple of plug wires, or if you didn't get a boot on all the way for a spark plug. Just test start and just listen to make sure there's no misfires. Okay, so I did just a quick run over at the engine, listening for any misses, and I played with all the boots just to make sure that they were all getting good contact, and starting to back up here, and I've gotten rid of that rough idle problem that I was talking about at the beginning there. It seems to be gone, and the idle is brought back up, actually maybe 150 RPM, so I think that did the trick, what I needed it to do.